When I first pulled into the driveway of my new suburban home, I was riding a high of optimism so intense it could have powered the sun. Sure, the moving truck was late, and my boxes were currently occupying more space in my head than in my actual house. But none of that mattered. I'd finally escaped my overpriced downtown apartment with the perpetually broken elevator. Suburbia promised peace, quiet, and a patch of grass that was mine. All mine. "Welcome to Maple Ridge Estates," chirped a middle-aged man in a polo shirt as he ambled over from the house across the street. He was holding a plate of cookies, smiling the way only someone with a hidden agenda could. "Hi there, Oh, no need to introduce yourself. I'm Gary, the Neighborhood Welcome Committee. And also," he glanced around conspiratorially and lowered his voice, "your friendly HOA treasurer. Ah, the fabled Homeowners Association. I'd read about them in online forums, where disgruntled residents shared tales of tyrannical rule. But I figured those were rare cases, probably blown out of proportion. After all, how bad could an HOA really be?" Gary handed me the cookies. "These are from my wife. And, just a quick heads up, don't leave your trash cans out past Tuesday night. Marcy, the HOA president, takes rules very seriously." "Duly noted," I replied, forcing a smile. That's when another neighbor wandered over, a wiry man in his 50s with an easy grin and a beer in hand. "Oh, let the newbie figure it out on their own, Gary. Let them experience the wrath of Marcy firsthand." "Wrath?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. "Relax, I'm kidding. Mostly. I'm Jeff, by the way. Welcome to the circus." Gary gave Jeff a disapproving look, muttered something about HOA decorum, and scurried off. Jeff chuckled and took a swig of his beer. "Don't mind Gary. He's harmless. Marcy, on the other hand, well, you'll meet her soon enough. Just follow the rules and you'll be fine." "Probably." I laughed it off, thinking they were exaggerating. I mean, how much power could a neighborhood HOA really have? That was the honeymoon phase. For the first 2 weeks, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. The neighborhood was idyllic. Manicured lawns, quiet streets, and friendly faces. I unpacked my boxes, planted a few flowers, and even waved to Marcy when she passed by in her white Lexus, clipboard resting on the passenger seat. But then, small things started to bother me, like the reminder notes left on my door. First, they were polite. "Please ensure your lawn is trimmed to no higher than 3 inches. Welcome to the neighborhood." Then they became oddly specific. "Trash cans must be pulled back to their storage area no later than 6 p.m. on collection day. Failure to comply will result in a fine." I shrugged it off. Rules are rules, right? Then came the fines. It was a Thursday morning, and I was running late for work. I dashed out to my driveway, coffee in one hand and my laptop bag in the other, only to freeze in my tracks. My car was gone. First, I thought it had been stolen. But then I noticed the small, fluorescent orange slip taped to my garage door. "Your vehicle has been towed for violating HOA guidelines. Please contact Ridgewood Towing for retrieval. Retrieval fee, $275. "What they?" My neighbors turned to stare as I let out a stream of expletives loud enough to shatter the idyllic silence of Maple Ridge. Jeff appeared at the edge of his lawn, shaking his head sympathetically. "You left your car hanging over the sidewalk, didn't you? I guess? Maybe by an inch or two. Yeah, they don't play around here." Marcy's clipboard army strikes again. Clipboard army? What was this, a dystopian novel? I spent the next hour trying to reach Ridgewood Towing, which turned out to be as pleasant as waiting in line at the DMV during a snowstorm. When I finally got through, I was greeted by a gruff voice informing me that my car was at their lot, and I'd better bring cash. Cash. Because apparently Ridgewood Towing operated like a 1980s pawn shop. That evening, after paying an exorbitant fee and retrieving my car from a sketchy lot on the outskirts of town, I decided to dig a little deeper into Maple Ridge's HOA. Something about the whole situation felt off. Jeff, ever the helpful neighbor, filled me in over a couple of beers. "Marcy's got Ridgewood Towing on speed dial," he said. "They're the unofficial enforcers around here. If your car even looks at a fire hydrant the wrong way, they'll haul it off. But That's insane, I said. Welcome to Maple Ridge, buddy. We're all just living in Marcy's world. The next morning after my towing ordeal, I woke up determined to get to the bottom of things. I wasn't sure if it was my natural stubbornness or just sheer disbelief that someone could weaponize an HOA like this, but I wasn't letting it slide. My first stop? Gary, the HOA treasurer. If anyone knew how things operated around here, it'd be him. I crossed the street and knocked on his door. He opened it cautiously, like he was expecting me to sell him a vacuum cleaner. "Oh, hi there," he said, his smile a bit too forced. "What can I do for you?" "I had a little issue yesterday," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "My car got towed. Something about HOA guidelines. I figured you might be able to help me understand the rules better, since you're the treasurer and all." Gary shifted uncomfortably. Well, the parking rules are very clear. They're in the HOA handbook." "The handbook?" I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the one that was buried under a mountain of other paperwork when I signed the HOA agreement?" "That handbook?" Gary chuckled nervously. "It's all outlined in there. If your car obstructs the sidewalk, it's considered a violation. Marcy is very thorough about enforcement." I folded my arms. "And Ridgewood Towing? How do they get involved?" "Oh, they're just a contracted partner," he said quickly. "Very reputable. They help keep things orderly." "Reputable?" "Sure." If by reputable he meant operating out of a lot that looked like the set of a crime show, Gary glanced at his watch. "Well, I'd love to chat more, but I've got HOA business to attend to." He started to close the door, but I stuck my foot in before he could shut it. "Just one more thing," I said. "Do you know how many cars they've towed in the past month?" Gary hesitated. I wouldn't know. Marcy handles all that." "Of course she does." Over the next few days, I started talking to more neighbors. What I found was a mix of resignation, frustration, and dark humor. "There's a system," one neighbor confided. "If Marcy doesn't like you, she'll find a way to make your life miserable." "They towed my truck last month," another said. "Claimed it was too large for my driveway. It wasn't even sticking out." "Ridgewood? They're vultures," Jeff told me. "They cruise through the neighborhood at night, looking for cars to tow. And guess who gets a cut of every fee?" That last bit made me pause. "What do you mean?" "Word is Marcy's got some kind of deal with Ridgewood. She calls them, they tow, and she gets a kickback." That explained a lot. The overly enthusiastic enforcement, the ridiculous towing fees, the mysterious contract Ridgewood had with the HOA. But I didn't have proof yet. Later that week, I decided to take a late-night stroll around the neighborhood. Call it curiosity, call it paranoia, but I wanted to see if Jeff's theory about Ridgewood's nocturnal habits held water. Sure enough, just after midnight, a tow truck rumbled into the neighborhood. I ducked behind a tree and watched as it crept along the street like a predator hunting for prey. The truck stopped in front of a house 2 doors down from mine. A man got out, flashlight in hand, and started inspecting the cars parked in the driveway. After a few minutes, he nodded to himself, hooked one of the cars up to his truck, and drove off without a sound. It was efficient, suspiciously so. The next morning, I knocked on the door of the house where the car had been towed. A frazzled-looking woman answered. Hi, I said. "I'm your neighbor down the street. I noticed your car was towed last night. Thought you might want to know." Her face darkened. "Again? This is the second time this month. They said I parked too close to the curb last time. What was it this time?" I shook my head. "I don't know, but something's not adding up. Have you tried disputing it?" She laughed bitterly. "With who? Marcy? She's the one who sent them." I spent the rest of the day digging through public records and HOA meeting minutes. It wasn't easy. The HOA website was about as user-friendly as a medieval torture device. But eventually, I struck gold. The towing company, Ridgewood Towing, was owned by someone named Daryl Whitaker. A quick Google search revealed that Daryl was, surprise, surprise, Marcy's brother-in-law. That was the smoking gun I needed. The shady towing practices, the selective enforcement of rules, the exorbitant fees. It was all part of a well-oiled machine designed to funnel money from residents straight into Marcy's pockets. Armed with this information, I knew I couldn't take Marcy down on my own. I needed allies, evidence, and a plan. Luckily, Jeff was more than happy to help. "Oh, I've been waiting for someone to take her down for years," he said, cracking open another beer. We started rallying the neighbors, sharing what I'd found and encouraging them to come forward with their own stories. As it turned out, there were plenty. Marcy's reign of terror had gone on for far too long, and now the neighborhood was ready to fight back. Word spread quickly, and it wasn't long before my living room became the unofficial headquarters for Operation Expose Marcy. Every night, a handful of neighbors would show up with their grievances, their towing receipts, and their righteous indignation. "This was my daughter's car," said a woman named Carla, waving a tow notice like it was a battle flag. "She was parked in my driveway while visiting for the weekend. Marcy said it was an unauthorized vehicle. They towed my SUV for being overweight." Another man chimed in. "What does that even mean? Are they body-shaming cars now?" The stories ranged from infuriating to downright absurd. A couple had been fined because their mailbox wasn't neutral enough. Someone else had been ticketed for leaving their garden hose visible from the street. By the time Jeff brought out his whiteboard and a pack of markers, the group had swelled to nearly 20 people. "All right," he said, uncapping a marker with the flourish of a game show host. "Let's break this down. What do we know?" I stepped forward, armed with my notes. "First, we know Marcy is selectively enforcing rules to target people she doesn't like. Second, we know Ridgewood Towing is in on it and they're making a killing. Third, I held up a printout of the public records I'd found. We know Ridgewood Towing is owned by her brother-in-law, Daryl Whitaker." The group murmured in outrage. Jeff nodded. "So, what's our goal?" "Get her out," someone shouted. "Expose the towing scam. Burn it all down." "Okay. Maybe not that last one," Jeff said with a laugh. "But yeah, we need to take Marcy down. And to do that, we need proof. Real, undeniable, can't weasel out of it proof." Over the next week, we worked in shifts to gather as much evidence as possible. Carla and another neighbor, Dave, went through old HOA meeting minutes to find discrepancies in Marcy's decisions. Jeff set up a hidden camera on his front porch to catch Ridgewood Towing in action. I focused on tracking down residents who had been victimized but hadn't spoken up yet. One night, Jeff burst into my house, holding up a thumb drive like it was the Holy Grail. "Got them," he said, grinning. He plugged the drive into my laptop and pulled up a video. It showed the Ridgewood tow truck cruising through the neighborhood, stopping at a house and towing a car. The kicker? The timestamp showed it was 3 a.m. "Who tows cars at 3 in the morning?" I asked, shaking my head. "People who don't want to get caught," Jeff replied. But now they have been. Armed with our evidence, we prepared for the upcoming HOA meeting. It was the perfect venue to confront Marcy. Public, official, and filled with witnesses. The night of the meeting, the community center was packed. Marcy sat at the head of the table, clipboard in hand, looking as smug as ever. Gary was there too, fidgeting nervously. When it was time for community concerns, I stood up, my heart pounding. "I'd like to address the issue of selective enforcement and towing practices in this neighborhood," I said. Marcy's smile tightened. "We enforce the rules equally for everyone," she replied, her tone dripping with faux sweetness. "Do you?" I asked, holding up a folder. "Because I've got receipts." Literally, I handed the folder to Jeff, who distributed copies to everyone in the room. Inside were towing records, timestamps from Jeff's video, and a printout showing that Ridgewood Towing was owned by Marcy's brother-in-law. The room erupted into murmurs. "I don't see how this is relevant," Marcy said, her voice wavering for the first time. "It's relevant because you've been abusing your power," I shot back. "You've been targeting residents for minor or fabricated violations, funneling money into your brother-in-law's business, and profiting off your neighbor's misery." Gary looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Jeff stood up next. "And let's not forget the towing practices. Cars being taken in the middle of the night, vehicles towed for being an inch over the curb. That's not enforcement. It's extortion." The neighbors started chiming in one by one. "You towed my car while I was on vacation. I've paid over $1,000 in fines this year alone. Enough is enough. Marcy tried to regain control, but the room had turned against her. Finally, someone made a motion to hold a vote of no confidence in her leadership. By the end of the night, Marcy was removed as HOA president. The next morning, I woke up to find a note taped to my door. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I crumpled it up and smiled. Bring it on, Marcy. Marcy's removal as HOA president was a victory, but it wasn't the end of the battle. Like any dethroned monarch, she wasn't about to go quietly. By the next morning, the entire neighborhood seemed to be buzzing with rumors. She's going to fight it in court, Jeff said, dropping by with his usual morning beer. I didn't question his life choices. She's been bad-mouthing you to anyone who will listen, Carla added later, during our now daily strategy meetings. She filed a complaint with the city about my unsightly lawn ornaments, Dave grumbled. Marcy may have lost her title, but she still had her clipboard and, apparently, a lot of free time. One of our first priorities was to dismantle the towing scam for good. After digging deeper into the HOA's finances, we found payments to Ridgewood Towing listed as neighborhood maintenance fees. When we tallied them up, the amounts were astronomical. This isn't just towing fees, Jeff said, pointing at the spreadsheet. She's funneling HOA funds into her brother-in-law's company. It wasn't just the towing either. We found invoices for landscaping work that had never been done, consultation fees paid to dubious vendors, and even a line item for community outreach events that nobody could recall attending. Wow, I said, staring at the numbers. She wasn't just crooked. She was a one-woman Ponzi scheme. Jeff smirked. I almost have to respect the audacity. Almost. With the evidence in hand, we held another community meeting, this time with the sole purpose of deciding what to do next. Lawsuit, Carla said immediately. Public shaming, Jeff offered, ever the creative one. Both, I said. We'll sue her for misappropriation of funds and fraud. And while we're at it, we'll make sure everyone in the neighborhood, and the local media, knows exactly what she's been up to. The room erupted in cheers. We hired a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. A cheerful man named Ron who seemed genuinely thrilled to take Marcy down. She's made my job a nightmare for years, Ron said during our first meeting. I've handled dozens of cases where HOAs abused their power. But this is next-level corruption. Ron filed a lawsuit on behalf of the neighborhood, citing fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. He also sent a formal complaint to the city council, outlining Ridgewood Towing's predatory practices and their connection to Marcy. As expected, Marcy fought back. She denied everything, claimed the towing partnership was entirely above board, and accused us of conducting a witch hunt. But the evidence was overwhelming. The receipts, the public records, the testimonies from neighbors. It all painted a damning picture. The trial was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed with neighbors, reporters, and even a few curious city officials. Marcy arrived with an air of defiance, dressed in a power suit that screamed, "I'm innocent. I swear." Our lawyer, Ron, tore through her defense like a wrecking ball. Can you explain why Ridgewood Towing, owned by your brother-in-law, was paid over $50,000 in HOA funds for services that were never approved by the board? That's not accurate, Marcy stammered. Ron held up the invoices. Would you like me to read them out loud? Marcy's lawyer objected, but the damage was done. By the end of the trial, the court ruled in our favor. Marcy was ordered to repay the misappropriated funds. Ridgewood Towing lost its contract with the HOA, and both were fined for unethical business practices. With Marcy out of the picture, the neighborhood began to heal. We elected a new HOA board, one that prioritized transparency and fairness. Finally, Jeff said, lounging on my porch with yet another beer. No more midnight towings, no more arbitrary fines. It's almost boring. Boring sounds pretty good right now, I replied. A few weeks later, I found another note taped to my door. You might have won this round, but I'll be back. I crumpled it up and tossed it in the trash, smiling to myself. Bring it on, Marcy.